Welcome to the Australian Hiker Podcast, Australia's longest-running hiking podcast, downloaded over 750,000 times in over 160 countries and providing you with an Australian perspective on all things hiking. We're your hosts, Tim and Jill Savage, coming to you from Warradandi country.
This is episode 265 of the Australian Hiker Podcast. And in this week's episode, we bring you Cape to Cape, interviews from the trail, part 2, as we make our way back on track to complete this lovely Western Australian trail. We hope you enjoy. Before we get into today's episode, if you'd like to help support Australian Hiker and this podcast, there are a couple of ways that you can help us out. Firstly, by subscribing on your podcast host of choice so that each episode is available as soon as it's published. And if you have the opportunity, leave us a 5-star review. Another way to support us is go to the Australian Hiker website at www.australianhiker.com.au and click on the Support Us page and buy us a coffee. You can do a one-off donation or become a monthly supporter. All donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue producing this podcast and blog. Now let's get on to today's episode. For us, the Cape to Cape walk was a trail of two halves. We initially tried to complete this walk earlier in the year and due to illness had to get off trail. We managed to come back again in early August 2023 and finish off this trail, and it gave us an opportunity to see what the weather was like at different times of the year. In addition, we undertook this trail initially as a self-supported trip, and we changed how that worked in the second half, which we'll talk about as we go through. This episode contains a series of recordings undertaken while we were on the trail for the 4 days that we were walking, just to give you an indication of what the trail was like and what we were experiencing as we went. In next week's episode, we'll also look at Cape to Cape, expectations versus reality, and help you to get the best out of a potential walk on the trail if you're looking at doing it. It's 8 o'clock Perth time on Friday the 4th of August, and as you can probably hear, we're in a car driving back down to continue our journey on the Cape to Cape walk in Western Australia. Last time we came to do this walk, we ended up getting off trail early due to illness, so we've decided just to come over and finish it off. And previously we actually got a bus and a train down to our starting point. This time we just decided we don't have enough time to take the cheaper, I suppose, and more leisurely bus and train route. We've opted off for buying a car, and we'll talk about how that's going to work when we've got a bit quieter and we're actually on trail. Weather's actually quite reasonable. It's a sunny sort of day, but as per usual, I lived in Western Australia a number of years ago and worked here. It's something you don't really expect if you come over here. You think, oh, it's nice and warm, and it is, certainly in the summertime, but at the moment, the weather in Gracetown, which is where we're heading to, is 8.8 degrees, feels like 5.2, and certainly last night when we got in on the plane, it was quite cool. So looking forward to starting the walk again and seeing how it goes.
Yeah, it's deceptively lovely day, probably a little bit cooler if we stepped out of the car, but reasonably quiet drive down now that we've left the city outskirts of City Perth outskirts, and just on the freeway heading south. Still got a couple of hours to go. And, clear skies, so it's looking like a good day.
Okay, next time you hear from us, we should be just about starting off. Good afternoon. It's 12:05. I've been going for just on an hour, and I've done 3.8 kilometres, so pace is probably where I expected it to be, given that the trail is softish sort of sand. So it does tend to slow you down a bit in that respect. Much different conditions to what we had when we were here a few months ago, and that was to be expected. We really were in the end of summer, early autumn at that stage, and it was actually quite warm and quite sunny, whereas today we had, on the drive down from Perth down to Gracetown, we had reasonably sunny conditions, but there's a good cloud cover over much of the sky with just some blue sky poking through. There is some rain out to sea right on the horizon. I don't know whether we'll get any rain. We were forecast not to have any today, but it's possible we might get some showers. Decided just to stop on the side of the trail somewhere a bit protected from the wind. There's not a huge amount of wind, but there's enough breeze to keep things a bit cooler again. And I must admit, I do love this sort of temperature. It's around about 12, 13 degrees, so it's quite nice for hiking in. Jill's gone down to Prevelli, which is where we're staying tonight. She's going to drop the car off and then start walking and meet me in the middle. Today was the day of choice, if you like. We could have either have crossed the Margaret River mouth, where it met the ocean, or do the bypass. I'd been following one of the Facebook pages which does daily photos. Looking at it yesterday, they were talking about 1 metre or waist depth water and need to be a good swimmer. And unfortunately, when I would have hit the inlet, it would have been pretty much the tide, not necessarily, it would have been dropping, but it would have been flowing at its fastest. So without actually being able to see what the photos of it look like today, I opted to do the inland trip anyway. Jill sent me a text message from Prevelli saying the people down there were saying, yeah, it's right up and you do need to do the detour. So that's what they're recommending down that way. So I think it was a good move to make that choice. It would have been good to do the inlet, but this is what the choices are for, and you've got to make those decisions. Okay, I will just put my recorder away and I will head on. It's 1 hour and 55 into the walk. I'm just sitting at a site that's identified as Umbies. I'm not quite sure why that is, on the Far Out app. I'm just sitting in the wooden lookout overlooking the ocean and just having a bit of a break and doing a recording before I head on. I've gone through and done 6.4 kilometres. So I'm roughly halfway to the turn-off point. So all up today, I was originally planning on crossing Margaret River and doing roughly 16 kilometres. It looks like with the diversion that adds about 4 kilometres. So I'm now got roughly 20 kilometres, which is going to push me through to about 6, I would say. Having said that, I'm averaging about 3.8 kilometres an hour, so 7 hours would give me probably 24 kilometres, so I'm guessing sometime between 5 and 6 at least anyway, and particularly if the conditions stay like they are. Still a hard walk. The sand is very soft on the trail. I mean, normally I'm used to having sandy trails in beach walks, but this is soft sand and you tend to sink into it, so that does slow you down. You may or may not be able to hear the ocean in the background. The waves are certainly rolling in. It's quite a pleasant day, and so far the rain is holding off on me at least anyway, but seems to be skirting around. I can see rainstorms on the horizon on a couple of different areas, so as long as it stays on the horizon, I'll be happy with that. Jill started walking the other direction, so I would expect to see her probably around about 2 hours. I would say probably about another hour to an hour and a half I'll catch up with her, roughly. She certainly travels slightly faster than I am, and she's travelling with a slightly lighter pack as well. We're both using the Far Out app, so we can at least see where we are on trail, and the phone signal's been reasonable. It may not have good internet signal, but it can certainly send text messages and make phone calls if need be. Okay, talk to you later. Good afternoon, it's 3:17. I'm just sitting here having met Jill at the detour turn-off on the Cape to Cape walk. Now there's a sign up here saying winter detour, and certainly I came across somebody at Ellensbrook, the historic area, and heard them talking about the crossing, the river crossing was getting a bit sketchy, and the waves walking along the coast seem to be pounding into the coasts. So I think it's probably definitely a good move, and everyone is taking the detour. So we're basically walking up a management road to start with, and Jill has already done that to get here.
Yeah, so I always get to do the same bit twice, which is kind of an interesting thing. That's how I know how to make an assessment about which direction is best. So I came from Prevelli, So I came from Prevelli, and the locals there were saying that the last couple of days of heavy rain inland has filled the river, the Margaret River, and that's coming down now, heading out to the sea. And yes, the crossing was not crossable, probably a little bit like a washing machine, I think.
I think on the way back, when we go through and finish in Augusta in another 3 days' time, I think what we'll do, the next day we head back to Perth, barring any issues, and we might actually drop in at the Margaret River and take some photos of the river mouth just to see what it's like, at least then, to give us an indication.
Yeah, so the walk I did this afternoon was relatively easy. Heading north, it is largely uphill, so we'll be heading south now, so it's a little bit of a more easy run. In some places, it's a bit tricky. There's a trail off the road, but not totally off the road, so that makes it a little bit awkward when it's a busy road.
And there's a car just coming past. It looks like it's a well-used management road. I think, like found out earlier on, this area is used a lot by surfers, and it's pretty popular for recreation of various types. Now, Jill mentioned that coming her way, this was uphill, and going back, it's going to be downhill on the whole. I found the same thing. Once I got off the coastline and started going towards Ellensbrook, I had this bloody steep hill, and it's not steep by standards of the Australian Alps, but certainly it was steep for this track. So it's like, good. All right, well, I'll just go through, have a couple more minutes rest, and then we'll head on.
Well, today's been a really good day. So the journey back to Prevelli from the trail proper, using the alternate route, was quite good, quite pleasant. Though we did get back a little bit late, and it was probably a little bit longer than we were expecting, or at least I was expecting. And some of the transit arrangements where we were close to the road wasn't really pleasant. There was a bit of road noise and so on. But we're here, we're rested and clean and fed, so, it's been a pretty good day.
Now, as Jill said, we're at Prevelli. We opted for a cabin rather than a tent. We just figured that after a day of hiking, we just wanted to be able to stay inside, have a warm shower, and not worry too much about the colder nights. Tent certainly would have been cheaper, but simply just chose to do that from a comfort perspective. One comment I would make, so this is we'd already done 2.5 days on this track earlier this year. So again, we picked back up where we left the track in Gracetown, and we've basically got 3 more days left. Today was supposed to be the smallest day distance-wise, around about 16 kilometres, but the issue is that Margaret River mouth, the inlet crossing, we didn't actually go and see it. Jill will go and have a look at it tomorrow morning, but we've been told by a number of people that because of all the rain inland, it's getting a bit too deep and a bit too rough. And we noticed when we walked over the bridge on the alternate route this afternoon, there was a good amount of water flowing down, and we figured that once this eventually hits the ocean mouth, it would have been quite heavy. So while it's possible, and it would have been low tide when we would have crossed if we had have tried, and that would have been 7:30 in the dark, which is not my preference. So ended up doing roughly around about 21 kilometres doing the alternate route, and I must admit I wasn't quite prepared for that. I've been sick for a week before this trip, and whereas I was preparing for this, wasn't prepared for getting sick a week out. So it was a hard slog for me today.
Yeah, and there were a few other people that were on the trail who also elected to do the alternate route. I think that was kind of a wise thing. I heard about someone in the last couple of days who just decided to go the regular route and cross at the river mouth, and they did it okay, but it was pretty deep and pretty rough, and therefore dangerous.
I think one of the things that surprised me is, the first 2.5 days on the trip were done in a much hotter time frame than we're doing now. So today's temperature was actually quite pleasant. I think today, from a landscape point of view, was probably the best day so far. I mean, we've still got 3 more days to go, but I think it was a bit more variety, a bit more vegetation. Some of the wildflowers are starting to come out, so really we're getting the start of the wildflower season. It wasn't just walking along coastal vegetation. It was a bit of a mix with coastal vegetation. No beach walking today as such, because we didn't go and do the Margaret River crossing. But we had a bit of variety, including soft sand, but not a huge amount of soft sand. So
that's our favourite, isn't it? Not.
Okay, so it was just, we're lying here in bed. We will be pretty much asleep probably in about 10 minutes, I'd say. Tomorrow we are going to Condo Campground.
Conto
Campground. And that's 16 kilometres walking. 16.6 kilometres walking. So that'll be our smallest day. But having said that, because we're staying in the Praveli, which is off track, that'll add a bit of distance. So it might be, call it 17.5 kilometres. But yeah, it'll still be the smallest day of the trip. And the issue we had, we did get into our campsite probably around about probably about 6:05, I think. But I started just after 11, that was a late start to do sort of 20 kilometres. Tomorrow the plan is to be walking by around about 8:30 for the roughly 17.5 kilometres. So it'll give us a bit more leeway and a bit more time to get into the campsite while it's still light.
Bit nervous about the Conto campground. We've got a regular sedan that we've hired, so hopefully it's not too much of a challenge getting into the campsite and getting the gear set up. But I've just had a look at one of the videos of the whole area. It's looking pretty good, but I'm not sure what the impact of the rain has had on the roads. So that'll be an interesting one to see whether or not Tim and I actually meet up tomorrow.
Okay, we'll talk to you in the morning. Good night. Good morning. It's Saturday, the 5th of August, and it's 8:27. Left the caravan park around about 15 minutes or so ago, and I'm just at the turn-off point back onto the trail. Praveli is actually off trail itself, but certainly if you're looking at staying somewhere in this area, you really have to walk into town and stay at the caravan park. We chose the cabin option, but certainly we could have tented it as well. But in all honesty, I'm really glad that we did choose the cabin option. We had a really good night's sleep. For me, 7 hours and 40 is pretty much unheard of, so I obviously needed it. Cool day, and certainly Cooled is standing here in the shade at the moment. You can hear the cars going past from time to time. I'm probably around about 25 metres from the road, and I'm just about to start walking uphill, and I don't know what the uphill is like, but given I've been walking uphill for most of the last 15 or 20 minutes, it's probably about what I'm used to. Yesterday I did just on 21.9 kilometres. Today the scheduling is 16.6 plus the probably 500 metres I did up the hill as well, so probably just on 17 kilometres. As I said, it's just on 8:30 now, and I'm estimating that I'll take roughly around about 4.5 to 5 hours without knowing what the terrain's like, so it could be a bit longer, could be a bit shorter, to get to Conto campground where we're next staying. Okay, I will talk to you later in the morning. It's 10:10. I've just stopped off on the side of the track somewhere convenient more than anything else. There was no logs or rocks to sit on, so I just had to pick a piece of raised ground. Definitely glad I've got this little sit mat with me. It's become a new favourite little gadget to have with me. This means I can sit down on whatever the ground is. It's comfortable and it's dry, so loving that. Been here for about 10 minutes. Just checked with Jill to see what was happening with her. She's driven down to Conto Campground where we're camping tonight, and we will. She'll start walking probably in the next 10-15 minutes, and I'll meet her in the middle before she turns around and we walk back to the campground again. Distance-wise, I've travelled 5.85 kilometres, and it's been about an hour and 49, but as I said, I've been here about 10 minutes. So I'm travelling around about 3.3 kilometres per hour. Interesting track, a lot of management road, a lot of sandy areas, so it sort of slows you down a bit. You're just sinking into this deep, soft sand. And yeah, it's a nice countryside. I think these yesterday and today were better than the first 2.5 days that we did earlier in the year. It was nice walking along the coastline, but this is coastline and you come into bushland as well. So bit of variety. And as I said, we're starting to at the very start of the wildflower season. So things are starting to come out. I think another 4 to 5, 6 weeks, it'll be really good. Now, we're staying at Conto Campground tonight, and as I said, that's 11.2 kilometres ahead. As I said earlier on in the last post, we'll probably travel around about 17 to 17.5 kilometres, which sounds about right. So if I add the 11.3 to the 5.85 I've done, that's just on 17 kilometres roughly, give or take. Nice weather. There's a bit of wispy cloud, but yesterday started walking at 1 o'clock and the cloud cover, it was definitely rain clouds, were starting to fill up the sky. Not heavy, and it didn't look like it was going to rain on me, but today is just this nice wispy white cloud. I think there is a potential chance of rain today, but only sort of 1 mil if anything. It's tomorrow and the next day. I think tomorrow I've got 0 to 6 millimetres and the day after 6 to 10, so I'd be expecting some rain in the next few days. Haven't really seen any wildlife this morning. Oh, sorry, I tell a lie. Kookaburra. I'd startle it, it'd move along the trail. I'd startle it again, it'd move along the trail until I eventually decided it moved off to get away from me. No other wildlife. Yesterday, I think I saw a large skink. It was scuttling off the track. But yeah, light on wildlife, which is not unexpected given it is winter here. Now, winter's all relative. The temperatures is really pleasant, whereas, Canberra, where I'm from, we're still getting potentially minus conditions, and even during this time in the morning, it'd probably only be sort of 3 or 4 degrees, maybe 5 degrees if I was lucky. Okay, I'll have a bit more rest and then I'll head on. Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. We're here at the beach just past the Redgate car park. Very popular surfing beach by the look of it, but also a very dangerous beach with a permanent rip and 2 seasonal rips where people apparently have died. So they warn people to be very careful, but the surfers seem to love it. Nice little beach, very small inlet crossing. I mean, it's sort of hardly call it an inlet, but it's more just a little creek. And we're just sitting on the other side of that, just having lunch and just about to head off to Conto Campground. About 5.5 kilometres from here to Conto Campground, so call it roughly an hour and a half-ish back there. The last section from when I had morning tea to here was very slow. I had management track, which was quite good, and then I went down a steep gully, crossed over a small river, I suppose you'd call it, to make sure that I didn't have to cross it over further down, over a bridge. And then I had lots of beach walking, and it was really soft sand. Nowhere was there really firm sand like you usually expect. So that sort of slowed me down. And then, as I said, on to Redgate, and then just having lunch here.
Another beautiful day today. Kind of wispy clouds, but not much really. And Tim said, this is a very popular beach. There are all sorts of activities that are happening here. And I've already seen, I guess, half a dozen walkers who look as if they're overnighting, but lots and lots of walkers with day packs, including a couple who are doing it through Cape to Cape, and they're getting picked up every day, and they were very pleased that they got their lunch made for them, and and they also got the canoe across Margaret River, so they didn't have to do the detour that we did, which was, it's not really bushwalking or hiking. It was a bit of a hard go, but it was better than walking through a whitewater river, I guess.
And you went down and had a look at the river this morning. So what was it like?
Look, it's I think from what I understand, from what people have described to me, I think it's better than it has been in the last few days. But still, I wouldn't do it. You can see the water moving really quickly. There's some white caps in there, and it does look quite deep too. So I've got some photos and videos of it, so we'll post some of those in the coming days. But yeah, definitely a good plan. I mean, it wasn't the most exciting walk doing the detour, but it was certainly the best plan and the safest plan.
And by the sound of it, there's potential to hire a canoe from somewhere to get across. So we'll see where we can find that out, and if we can find it, we'll put it into the show note right up. All right, time to head on. So we've got, as I said, roughly around an hour and a half to get there. Jill said she got into Conto Campground quite easily this morning. We hired just a standard sedan, and we were a bit worried with some of the conditions of the roads where you really would need a four-wheel drive, but sounded like the access road into Conto was quite good.
Yeah, so the road itself into the campground is bitumen, and then within the campground, very well maintained. There are a couple of biggish potholes, but nothing that even a small sedan couldn't handle or go around, which is pretty much what I did. But yeah, look, it's a very well maintained area.
Okay, off we go again. Good evening. It's 6:06 on Saturday the 5th of August, and we're here at Conto Campground. We've been here for a few hours actually. The sun's almost gone down. The tent's set up, ready to go. Just topping up my water because, like a lot of these campgrounds, the recommendation is to filter. So we're using a gravity filter. Given there's two of us, makes things a bit quicker. Although the gravity filter is being a bit slow, it hasn't been used for a while, but it is working for doing the bigger quantities. Today ended up being roughly around about 17.5 kilometres approximately. I'll check exactly what it was when we do the ride-up. But it was probably an easier day, at least from my perspective. I think the first day or the second day for me always tends to be the hardest. In this case here, it was the first day. So we're pretty much getting ready to, as soon as we've done the water and put the stuff in the car, we're pretty much right to go.
Yeah, so today was lovely. I mean, I did really enjoy today. I enjoyed parts of yesterday. The detour wasn't so interesting, but certainly the landscape and the changes in the landscape today were very pleasant, and you had a combination of, heath and coastal and beach, so it was really quite nice. Saw quite a lot of people around. We're in the, the car camping area of Conto, and we're pretty much the only ones here. There are 14 sites in this particular part of the campground, and it's a really big campground, but out of the 14 in this section, only one's occupied, and that would be us. So so it's kind of nice. So a little bit peaceful. I didn't think it would be as peaceful as this. And in the morning we've got a very, very, very short walk to the start of the trail, so that's even better.
Yeah, it's probably maybe 50 metres if you're lucky to the start of the trail. So,
Can't miss it.
and it's interesting. Jill just took me over and showed me where it was, and it's really, as I said, it's about 50 metres, and then it's a downhill slope through looks like a burnt off area, and it's a straight line. So there's looks like a management road that runs for probably about a kilometre through this dead burnt off area. So it's not going to be difficult to find my way. And there's a sign up actually saying, please don't go off track. One thing I meant to say today, up until about morning tea, the signage on this trail is pretty good, and I find that Western Australia does their trail signage well. You typically get a turn arrow at a junction or a road, and then around about 15 to 20 metres further up, you'll get another arrow pointing in the direction you're supposed to be going, and that's just to confirm that you have actually taken the right route. Today was a bit of an odd one. I actually had a couple of times where I was on a management road, I went off the management road for about 50 metres and then back onto the management road again.
Just to make it interesting.
Yeah. And I found that I had one where I came to a junction and I thought, I just don't know where I'm supposed to be going. And it was almost like a roundabout in the middle of all these intersection of trails. And I just went around the other side of the clump of trees that was blocking the other side, and sure enough, there was the sign pointing in the right direction. So I think it's one of these sort of things on this trail or any other trail in Western Australia. It seems to be, if there is a sign there, if you can't find it, just have a bit of a closer look, and if you still can't find anything, you might well have gone off trail. But so if you turn anywhere, there will almost invariably be a sign saying this is the direction you're supposed to be going.
Yeah, and I must admit, I didn't find any difficulty today. I mean, there were a couple of moments in one section picking our way through some of the limestone rocks, but it was only a short section, and you look up and there's the trail sign. So it might not have been exactly where I was supposed to be, but it was pretty close.
One of the advantages of having someone follow along with a car and dropping the car to the next campsite and then walking in to meet you is it makes things a bit easier. And certainly for us, we've got Hamlin Bay tomorrow, and then the next night we basically finish off the walk, all things being given equal, at Augusta, or at the lighthouse or at Augusta. We don't finish at Augusta because it's about a 10-kilometre walk. And so that last day, Jill's actually going to be dropping the car off, walking in to meet me, and this is our longest day, roughly 24 kilometres. We'll get back to the car, and we've opted to stay at Hamlin Bay for 3 nights. And that was because we booked the second night. We thought it was just going to be easy, just to leave everything there, and then just for Jill to drive in and walk in to meet me, and we'll head back to the caravan park again. And funnily enough, there's a winter special, and it's pay for 2 nights, get 3. And the second night for us was cheaper anyway because it was a weekend, so Sunday night was a bit dearer, Monday night was a bit cheaper, and the third night was free. And we were actually planning on either having a second night at Augusta or a second night in Perth, because we'd allowed that extra night just in case we needed it for hiking, and potentially we may still do. But it means we'll end up staying 3 days in Hamlin, even after completing the whole walk. There's a couple of campsites that are still out of action. So there's one just not far from where we are now that's out of action because of the fires. When we looked earlier in the year, Dependi, which was the and forgive me if the pronunciation's wrong on that, it's the one that's about 10 kilometres from the southern trailhead. It was at that time a few months ago out of action because of the fires. And it may be still available. It may be available now, I don't know. But that means for the last day, instead of doing a 14 and a 10-kilometre day, it's a 24-kilometre day. Because wild camping in Western Australia is not a thing unless it's an absolute emergency. So
having said that, I think I've seen lots of places where people have been, evidence of where people have been camping, but they're not supposed to.
this campsite, as Jill said, is quite nice, and yeah, we are the only ones in this area. So I know when we walked in today, it was like, oh god, there's a group of people with the music blaring away.
Yeah, five 4-wheel drives and some really big tents and a lot of music, and we thought, anyway.
Yeah, can't hear them. So it's actually they're far enough away, so it's nice and quiet, which is good.
Yeah. And what you do with this campsite is that you actually book an area, and essentially it's, as I said, in this particular area, it's Whistler's. There are 14 sites. One's out of action just nearby, but it's first come, first serve, and I think we were pretty pleased. We're literally here alone.
Yeah. So we've got the toilet probably, 50 metres away. The trail start for tomorrow about 50 metres away. There is a fire pit here, and there's a stack of firewood if you really feel so inclined. But given that it's not even 6:30 yet, we'll be in bed definitely by 6:30, I think, as soon as the water's done, which is getting very close.
Yeah, look, it's looking close, isn't it?
We'll then head off to bed. Last night I had a really good sleep, so hopefully the same again for tonight. See how it goes. I will, given it's a longer day tomorrow, I want to be on the trail and walking by roughly around about 7:30. I'm going to have probably, if I say 7 hours worth of hiking tomorrow, that will probably be, give me plenty of time. That'll basically get me into camp by about 3:30. So it's, I've got plenty of time. It's the next day with 24 kilometres. Again, I'll leave at 7:30 just to give me plenty of time to get there. And we're not camping tomorrow night. It's finishing off the walk and back to the accommodation in Hamlin Bay. Okay, that's all for tonight, and we will talk to you in the morning for the start of the walk. Good morning. It's 7:42 on Sunday the 6th of August, and I'm packed up, ready to go as soon as we've done this recording. Jill's going to wait till the tent's dried out a bit and then drive down to Hamlin Bay, which was where we're staying, and she'll drop the car off and walk in to meet me at some point through the daytime, depending on what time she gets away and what she gets a few things done. One comment I would make about this campsite, it's a really nice campsite. We were the only ones here in this particular camping area. We noticed there was a couple that were hiking on towards Hamlin Bay, by the look of it, that left around about half an hour ago. We've chosen site number 7. 6 is where the track goes through, which and we noticed that the couple that walked through pretty much walked through between site 6 and 9, so it's a bit more obtrusive. Site number 5, which we're facing, is close to the toilet, so it's really a matter of picking something you like the look of, something that feels right. We originally thought site 5, but we ended up with site 7, which was quite a good one.
Yeah, and where we're staying, I think we said before, is the car camping area where you can have tents and swags, but not camper vans and so on. There is a separate area for hikers and tents only, and no vehicles. So that's up a little bit up the other end, a little bit more secluded. But I guess, it just depends what you're doing and how you choose to do this. And I think, we often talk about choose your own adventure, and this is definitely one of those. We've seen people doing day walks, supported walks, through walks. I'm not quite sure what you classify what we're doing, but whatever it is that we're doing as well. So, I think it is one of those ones that you can make it up as you go along.
Now, one comment I forgot to make last night, I've got a picnic table here as part of the site. We had our food and all our bits and pieces out on the table. We walked probably 12 metres away to the tap and turned around, and there was a magpie on the table. And even this morning there was a crow in the tree above us just waiting for us to disappear. So if you are going to walk away, even if it's just to the tap, pay really close attention and make sure you haven't got any food lying at the table, because it'll go pretty quickly.
Yeah. I mean, they're not hanging around bothering. They're polite in that sense. But we did notice that they were waiting for the opportunity to pick up something brightly coloured.
Okay, so it is 7:45. I'll be away by 8 o'clock. All I've got to do is put the recorder away and start walking. It's a cool morning, but it's not too bad. I've just taken my puffy jacket off, which I've had on for the last hour and a half, while I've just been around campsite having breakfast. But and it's a marginally cool, but certainly once I start walking, I'll warm up.
Yeah, very little cloud, just wispy bits in the sky. The sun's just about to come up over the trees around the campsite, so I think it'll warm up pretty quickly.
Okay, we will talk to you, or I'll talk to you later on this morning. It's 9:41. I've been going for an hour and 45 minutes, and I've done 6.3 kilometres. Just stopping to have a morning tea break, which I usually do roughly around about the hour and a half-ish sort of period, just to keep the food and the energy up and going. It's quite a nice day, actually. I'm sitting in a wide track. It looks like it was a management road at some point, and probably still is, but it gets very little use by the look of it. I'm sitting in amongst the forest. Trees, mainly eucalypts, are probably around about 20 metres tall, fairly dense, and I'm almost walking through a green tunnel. So my poor little Garmin inReach is sitting there flashing away trying to send a signal, and it doesn't look like it's having much luck at the moment. So it'll obviously pick that up when it gets a bit of clear sky. Vegetation this morning's been quite nice. It's been a nice part of the trip, actually. Walking through forest pretty much most of the morning, and I've come across only one person going the other way. And I know there's a couple ahead of me that left from Conto this morning, about 40 minutes ahead. So I'm unlikely to catch up with them unless they are really dawdling and really having long breaks. Moving at a good pace. I'm probably moving at a better pace than I have been for the last couple of days. And I have had some uphill as well. So if anything, that did slow me down as I made my way up a roughish sort of track compared to what I've got now. Yeah, it's just really lovely, so I'm really enjoying this. The weather's also nice too. The sun's out. It doesn't look like it's going to rain. I think the forecast was for potential rain, and certainly the forecast for tomorrow is to get some rain. But I think I think what was forecast for a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, is being pushed back. So with luck, it'll just be tomorrow that I have the rain, and that's it. All right, I'm going to finish my break and then keep on going. It's 12:14. I've just reached the beach section of this walk, which is the last 6.5 k's taking you to Hamlin Bay. I have been going for 4 hours and 19 minutes, and I've done 14.3 kilometres. And I've met Jill virtually just at the turn off to the beach. And you've done?
I've done 6.5 kilometres, and it's taken me an hour and 55, but it's very hard going.
Yeah, I came across a couple of hikers about probably an hour ago, and apparently they said they didn't get as far as they'd planned, so they actually ended up camping on the beach. But they said, yeah, the beach is pretty soft and hard going. They advised us walking in the tracks of the four-wheel drives which use the beach. And I think that's probably going to be about right by the look of it, because the sand here just seems to be soft.
And there are plenty of four-wheel drives, that's the other thing.
Good morning this morning. I had a good pace. I think day 3 for me, I'm into a routine and a rhythm now. Feeling quite comfortable, so which is good. And looking forward to getting to Hamlin Bay, so that'll get me there roughly, if it's about 2 hours, about 2:15, 2:30-ish, sometime there.
Maybe 3 o'clock.
Maybe 3 o'clock, yeah, depending. Yeah, it's getting to the end of the day by that stage. So you can probably hear the waves in the background. We are sitting just off the trail, off the edge of the beach, and then in probably the last bit of shade between now and Hamlin Bay.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a really, really warm day today. I was talking to one of the locals who was really enjoying the warmer weather and said it was very unusual. but it does make it hard walking with your pack and so on. But there's plenty of people out on the beach surfing, lots of kids, lots of dogs, lots of four-wheel drives. It's a bit quieter up the other end towards Hamelin Bay, but it's kind of a bit of a shock, I think, for those who come from the East Coast, where you don't get to drive on the beach. They're seriously driving on beaches here.
Yeah, I think the forecast for today was 19 degrees. Jill was saying the only place to get an internet or phone signal was at the boat ramp just across from the caravan park. And I just turned the phone on here. Yeah, no signal, and I haven't had any signal for a while. So otherwise, Jill and I normally would have been touching base.
Yeah, there's a little bit of signal on the beach right near Hamelin Bay, but it soon disappears.
Okay, we're going to have lunch and then we'll head off. It's 6:50 on Sunday the 6th of August, and we're here at
Hamelin Bay.
So we've got one day left, but it's a big day, and it's interesting looking at information in the cabin, looking at what's online on the app, looking at the guidebook. It's somewhere between 20 to 24 kilometres, and I was actually expecting 24 kilometres tomorrow. Today we pretty much ended up getting in at
just around 3:30-ish.
And that for me, I started this morning at probably about 7:45. And there was a slow going last post-lunch side of things where basically I met Jill virtually just past the beach. She decided to come up and meet me and then realised that I shouldn't be far away, so started heading back down and I pretty much turned up. So
Yeah, I was sitting there having done the beach walk and the climb up out of the beach, and then doing the calculation of how far I'd come and how long Tim had been walking, and I suspected he'd be there pretty soon, and I looked up and there he was.
So we had lunch at the base of the upward climb and just sat there for a while, and then had a 6.5 kilometre walk along the beach. And this was a hard walk too, because the sand in Western Australia seems to be soft, whereas over east we're used to having hard sections of the beach and soft sections, but certainly not here. So what we actually ended up with was there's really no hard sections at all, and for the first half of the beach in particular, what we ended up doing was walking along four-wheel drive tracks, and it was probably a good indication of where the four-wheel drive tracks were fairly thin. It means you're having a heavy vehicle compressing the sand. It wasn't sinking in, so it ended up making a nice track. So we certainly, the first section, that's what we did. But then the beach changed slightly, and we did actually shift down towards the end of the beach for something slightly harder in the way of sand.
Yeah, it's a pretty hard walk. I did 13 kilometres on that beach today, and definitely feeling it. It's beautiful, and lots of people, lots of four-wheel drives, lots of surfers, as well as the usual kind of family swimmers. So well used beach, but there's a lot going on.
And I think, as Jill said, lots of surfers, but they were getting there in four-wheel drives. So there was good traffic up and down the beach. And walking along the beach, you do need to pay attention to see what's actually happening with that.
Yeah, I did talk to one of the locals, and they were giving the advice that you walk in the tracks that the four-wheel drives have made. That's easier going. And I said, aren't you a bit worried about being run over? And he said, well, you just jump out of the way. And I thought, okay, well, you just jump out of the way. Most of the time, you can hear them coming. There's the occasional quiet four-wheel drive, which makes it a little bit difficult, but you do need to pay attention.
So we're staying in a cabin at Hamlin Bay. Looking forward to having some nice luxury like a shower and being able to cook as necessary. And we're basically going to head off tomorrow morning for the last day, barring any issues, but it'll be a long day. So I'll try and get away from here at around about 7:30 in the morning. Okay, that's all for today. We'll talk to you later on. Good morning. It's 6:44 on Monday the 7th of August. It is still pitch black outside, which is not unusual for Western Australia. They tend to be a bit darker in the morning and a bit lighter later in the day. I'm hoping to get away, and in fact I will get away by 7:30. Today the forecast temperature is 20 to 23 degrees, which is a lovely winter's day. But it's probably a bit hotter than I would prefer, but that's what it is. I will start from Hamlin Bay Campground or Hamlin Bay Caravan Park with walking out of the park, and I've got about a 1.1 kilometre beach walk, which is a bit better than a 6.5 kilometre beach walk yesterday, but that'll be a slow start for this morning. Then back inland, and I think I'm onto the beaches a couple of more times later in the day. I'm still not sure exactly the distance I've got to travel between here and the lighthouse trailhead in the south. My app is telling me just under 20 kilometres. Distance-wise, I'm expecting 24. I've seen other figures of 20, so I'm prepared for 24. That's fine. So that's why I said I wanted to start at 7:30 just to get away early and give me plenty of time. So if it takes me 7 or 8 hours, I'm going to get there mid to late afternoon by starting so early.
So one of the things we didn't say about staying at Hamlin Bay is that there is virtually no network connection. So in some pockets, standing on a little bit of a rise with your leg out and holding your tongue to one side, you might be able to get 1 bar 3G, but that's pretty much it.
So just waiting until we get a bit more light. We'll pretty much... it's 10 to 7 now, so pretty much by the last time I had my last toilet stop and
I'm not sure everybody wants to
put my shoes on, we're pretty much right to go. So yeah, it's just a matter of waiting until it gets light. Talk to you later on today. It's just on 9 o'clock on Monday the 7th of August. I've been travelling for just on about an hour and 46 minutes, but I've been sitting here for 15 minutes taking a break. Just up at the top of the hill, looking back towards where we were staying last night at Hamlin Bay, and I can see the beach that I've started walking on almost straight away. Been a hard slog this morning. The beach walk was around about 1.5 kilometres, and it was soft sand, so it took me, I think I was only doing 2 kilometres per hour, and then I got off the beach, and then I'm going over a series of hills. Now, not big hills by no means, but certainly for the rest of the trip where it's been reasonably flattish, 100 odd metre hills up and down for a section are noticeable. And again, slow you down. So I'm not travelling overly fast today compared to yesterday. And in fact, I think it took me an hour and a half to do 3.9 kilometres, to give you an idea. Bit of a breeze, which you can possibly hear, which is quite nice. It's sort of cooling it down, given that it was supposed to be 20 to 23 degrees today, so I'm quite happy about the breeze. And I'm just sitting just off a bare patch of sand, just off the side of the trail. As I said, just looking down to the ocean, looking down to where I've walked from, and back to Hamlin Bay itself. I'm pretty sure I do have 24 kilometres to go. My mapping app is telling me I've got 20.7 kilometres left to go, and given that I've done 3.9, that would make sense. That's around the 24 kilometre mark. But that was what it was telling me I had from the caravan as well, so it's interesting that the figures weren't quite right. Okay, I will just pack myself up and I will head off. It's 10:50 on Monday the 7th of August, and I've been going for 3 hours and 38 minutes, and I've done 8.5 kilometres. Really slow going. It's not that I'm struggling, it's just the difficult terrain. So I had one little section probably about half an hour ago of rock walking, but there was a warning sign that came with that saying, caution, blowholes present, look out for holes and cracks where this may occur. So you had to sort of step your way around these rock cracks and listen to the water. Certainly, unless you went out, the rocks itself was okay, but you do have to pay attention to what was going on. And had the seas been big, it would have been an issue. In fact, had the seas been big, I would have actually taken an inland route on one of the management roads, because I did actually come to a little car park at the end of that. So the roads do interconnect, you just have to work out where they are. So I've just come off a rocky beach and a little headland. I'm onto a long section of beach walk by the look of it. And as I crested this little ridge coming down on the beach, I got my first look at the lighthouse, which is my destination point later today. I think distance-wise, I had certainly the greatest elevation change and drop this morning. There is more later on, but certainly this was the biggest one I had earlier on. I think realistically, the way I'm travelling at doing 3 hours and 30 minutes for 8.5 kilometres, realistically, I'm going to be probably 9 to 10 hour day today, which was one of the reasons I left. I actually ended up leaving at around about 7:15. So worst case, if it ends up being 10, I'll get in around about 10 hours. It'll again end up being about 5 o'clock this afternoon. But looking at the elevation change, the bottom half of the section is a bit easier. Nice day, sunny. It's warm without being hot. That breeze is quite pleasant, so it sort of keeps the temperature down a bit. I'm sitting here on this little beach in the shade at the moment, just watching all the piles of kelp in front of me and then the waves just behind it. So lovely little area, enjoying it, and looking forward to the rest of the day. It's 2:28 on Monday 7th of August. We've just stopped and had lunch. I've done 16.7 kilometres.
And I've done 8.5 and a long wait for Tim.
So this morning, it's interesting actually. Well, when we do the next podcast episode where we talk about expectations versus reality, I think doing the 24 kilometres on the last day is fine, but it's a hard day. And just because the terrain is so varied, a lot of walking over rock platforms, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of beach walking. There was a section I did this morning was walking along a rock platform, and there was a lovely warning sign just at the start saying, blowholes and crevices present. Please pay very close attention as you walk past, because every so often you get this jet of water shooting up from the through one of the funnels in the rock. So if you know what to look for, it's not a problem. But if you're not familiar with it, it's like, oh dear, this is going to be a bit of a worry. But that was just a slow picking away through. The beach walking, again, about 7.5 kilometres. That was a slow walk through. And then uphill, it was only about 100 to 150 metres in height, elevation change. But it was just after having done all the flattish or relatively flattish walk over the last few days, it's a bit of a shock to the system. So, as I said, I've been going now for 7 hours 17, including lunch. And my average pace, I'm doing a kilometre every 26 minutes. So it's around about 2 and a bit kilometres per hour, just because of the difficult terrain.
So I think the next piece Tim will find a little bit easier on the way back to Lewin from what I understand his experience. But one of the things I would say is that we're very, very close to the ocean, and that's mostly along the way on this leg, and I love that, and I love the rock ledges, but you're really close to the ocean. So if that's a concern for you, then you might want to think about some strategies to help you through that one. But beautiful as that might be, I also appreciate that not everybody is going to enjoy that.
And I think that was something I was actually thinking this morning. I got some videos of the beaches I was walking along, and in some instances the water was coming up probably around about 8 metres from the sandbanks, and you could see where at some point in the near past the wave conditions have been bad enough they've actually taken parts of the sandbanks out. So if you're trying to do this walk in storm conditions, you just wouldn't be able to. There's just too many rocks and close to the ocean. And as Jill mentioned, the ocean probably from where we're sitting at the moment, and we're sitting probably 9 or 10 metres back in a little alcove, but the ocean from where we are is 30 metres. The water is coming up over the rocks in front of us, and that's probably 20 metres away. So there's not a lot of leeway. And yes, you can hear the sound of the ocean and the waves in the background, but it's not overly rough. If it had been really big and rough seas, you'd be getting water right on the trail.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few white caps in the ocean in the distance, so it's not, smooth seas, but it's certainly, as Tim says, not heavy seas. So, weather is important, tides are important, and you're very exposed on this walk. It's stunning, it's fabulous, but it also could be quite dangerous as well.
Okay, time to press on. Good evening. It's 6:40. It's Monday the 7th of August. We're back in our accommodation at Hamlin Bay, having finished our walk around about 40 minutes ago. And we thought we'd leave it till we got back to our accommodation to do the final recording. Today was a pretty hard day, no doubt about that. I walked just on around about 26 kilometres, and Jill did...
About 21 kilometres.
So I think I had the hardest of it because I got to do the 7.5 kilometre beach walk. And again, the sand is not the hardest in the country. For those people from over east who are used to having hard packed sand on certain parts of the beach, you really don't get that too much here. There's only short sections of it. Good walk, but very long, tiring walk. So I left... I walked out of the cabin here at 7:15 in the morning and finished at 6 at night. So it was almost, it was 11 hours, or just under 11 hours. And it was surprising, actually. I looked at my average speed, and it ended up being around about 2.4 kilometres per hour, which is pretty slow from what I'm used to. But given the beach walking, given the sand on the trails, it just made things a lot more difficult, although pleasant as well.
Yeah, we had planned to meet up earlier in the morning, but we didn't meet up until early afternoon. My walk out was, I think, much easier than Tim's, but at one point I continued walking along a rock ledge, and I just couldn't see trail markers, and I was really concerned that if I went too far, I probably would have missed him. But as it turned out, I was heading in the right direction. All I needed to do was go a little bit further, and I'd see another trail marker, and I would have been able to meet up with him a little bit earlier. But as I said, just not quite sure that I was heading in the right direction. And it wasn't until a couple of walkers came the other way that I realised that where I had been was correct, and I could have continued on, but decided to wait a little bit longer, and then sure enough, in the distance, in the mist of the waves crashing onto the rocks, I saw this little black figure in the distance, and figured it was Tim.
So all up, really tiring, hard day, and I think the last campsite, certainly a couple of months ago, it was closed due to fire. I hadn't bothered to check if that was still the case. So potentially breaking it up and doing sort of 14 kilometres and then 10 kilometres roughly might be an easier process rather than doing that big long day in one hit. But that's the decision that you need to make on the trip, and whether you can cope with that sort of conditions. I mean, overall, the weather was quite mild. There was just a gentle breeze all day, so it was warm, but the breeze sort of stopped it being hot. There was only short sections where it became a bit hot when we got out of the wind. So got back to the Cape Leeuwin Lighthouse. Jill made the comment to me that the starting off at Cape Naturalist, there's a bit of a formal trailhead. The return trailhead on the other end is pretty basic. It probably needs to be a bit more upmarket, if you like.
Yeah, it was a bit of a letdown when you come across it, and it's just kind of two short poles with a horizontal piece that says Cape to Cape track, and pretty much that's it. A bit of a map and some explanation, but not a whole lot, given, this is a pretty extensive and impactful kind of track and walk, and the effort that you put in, I think you needed a bit more of a reward when you got back.
Okay, in our next podcast episode, we're going to revisit expectations versus reality on this track, and we'll go through the logistics, our recommendations for how to do this walk, the times of the year, what to look for to get the best out of this walk. Okay, hope you enjoyed these recordings. We'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.
And bye from me.